SpaceX Starlink's app, tips and tricks. This is going to be a guide that you're not going to want to miss. A lot of good detailed information that you probably don't know about. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time. Today we have a little bit of fireside. So good, so good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, hanging out, talking tech, talking photo, talking video. Today is a technology day. We'll be talking about SpaceX Starlink's application. And what I did is I went with a lot of you guys' ideas. You said, listen, can you put together a video that shows us little detailed how-tos, tips and tricks and whatnot, but within the application that we can use, maybe for diagnostics, maybe just to see what's going on with obstructions, or maybe just simply using the application to find out if everything is running as it should be. What is your latency? What are your pings? What is going on? I'm going to give you all that information plus a ton of other tips and tricks that you can use, once again, from within your app. So before I jump into this, I want to say that if you enjoy this content, even in the least, consider throwing it a thumbs up. That's very helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not. If you are, I appreciate that. Be a good way to start the new year. Also, tell your friends, family, colleagues, Reddit, Facebook, wherever. Tell them about this channel. Tell them about the video so we can grow this in 2025. Also, if you haven't downloaded any of my ebooks, check them out over at JCristina.com/books. Once again, JCristina.com/books. And if you just want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button right down here. Click on that, give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, it's perfectly fine. The video is still free. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. And if you are subscribed, as I said before, click this notification button over here. So when I go live, like tonight, you'll be notified of it. That'll be helpful, right? Come and join me on Fridays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for JC Live. We call it Free Speech Friday. And we just talk about anything and everything. Also, if you want more Starlink content, more Starlink goodness, I have about 398, 96, somewhere on there, almost 400 videos that I've put together just for you. Once again, helpful how-tos, tips, tricks, what to do, what not to do, what to buy, what not to buy, and how to do everything in between when it comes to SpaceX Starlink. And of course, finally, the why behind all of it, because as I always say, this channel has always been and always will be about the why. So let's jump right into this. We can see my phone is open. This is the application. This is what it looks like when you go into it. Now, let me start out by saying that if you have not updated your app recently, do so, because some things in here might not be in yours if you have an old version. So make sure that you have updated your Starlink application. So let's start out by the look and feel of it. Is there some things that we can change to make it fun, but then also give it more information? So if we come down here to the bottom, we're going to click on Advanced. And from Advanced, let me go and scroll through this with some of this stuff I need to blur out because it's my details. But at the very bottom, we can see it says Teleport Starlink to Mars. And then underneath that, it says Show Statistics Widgets. Now, let's start out by teleporting to Mars. If we click on that and then get out of the advanced area, as we can see, we are now on Mars. Everything turns red. It's really super cool, right? I love this. I have this on all the time just because I'm a geek and I like this kind of stuff. So anyways, this is what it looks like. I would say do that just for the fun of it. Let's go back into Advanced, scroll down to the bottom. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn on the Show Statistics widget. This is really helpful. Now that's all we have to do is just pull down and we can see we are back to the main screen, but we can see things have changed now, right? We now have ping success and we have another area here that says latency. Now this is really important information, very important. Ping success basically tells you how successful it has been in pinging a specific site. Right now it's pinging, I believe it's Cloudflare, which would be 1.1.1.1, their name server. You can set it to Google's name server. And I'm going to get into that before the end of this video because it is important. Now, besides that, we have latency. Currently, we see latency that's 43 milliseconds. That's actually kind of high for me. For the most part, my latency is in the 20s. Matter of fact, if we click on either one of these, it'll give us more information. So let's go ahead and click on latency, and here we go. Currently, the latest latency is pretty bad. We're sitting at about 40, 60. Now we're at 25. That is more like the millisecond latency that we normally would see. What that means to me is, as of right now, we probably are away from the version 2 mini satellites. We're probably using a version 1 or maybe even a 1.5. There could be congestion going on. Now we can see here it's just lowered back down to 21, 23, 32, and 28 and whatnot. It's going down. We're down to 22 here. So we will see that this latency, this median latency, will go down. All right. But for now, you know that the current ping is in the 20s, and that's what it normally is. So we'll probably have a version 2 mini overhead, which is good. All right. So let's go ahead and get out of this and go back to the main screen. If we go to ping success, we can see that it's currently pinging Google and it's pinging Cloudflare. Google, which is the 8.8.8.8 number, and Cloudflare, which is the 1.1.1.1. Now, I did that manually. I'm going to teach you how to do that before the end of this video also, because I think it's important. There's no reason to give it only one DNS server. You might as well give it 2. So if one DNS server goes down for any reason, the other one will pick up the slack, so to speak. So we can see that SpaceX Starlink's success rate is 99.85. That is fantastic. There is no hiccups going on here at all. That's good. That means that we're getting 100% coverage all the time. It is not going down at all. That is for the Starlink itself, and then for the router, we have a 99.44 connection rate. Perfect. Let's go back to the main screen here. There we go. Now, if we want to know all of the statistics that are currently available, we could just simply come down here, click on statistics, and it's going to bring up this page. It shows you ping, latency, throughput, and power draw. Now, if you are in an RV or you're on a campground, this page is probably pretty important for you because as we can see, we're currently drawing 33 watts. That is really not bad. All right, that is low wattage. And the reason being is we're not using it that much, right? There's 1 or 2 people that are connected to it. It's not having to work very hard. And there you go, 33 watts. Now, bear in mind, I currently have a generation 2. That's the fully articulating one, the one that positions itself. Okay, that is the one that I have. There is a generation 3 out also, which is actually a little bit better. So if you can get a Gen 2 or a Gen 3, get a Gen 2 if you need that fully articulating head at the top. So if you want to put it on the top of a 3-story building and you want it to be able to adjust itself and you don't have to do it anymore, use one of those. If you have access to it, well, then just use the version 3 because the version 3 is going to give you a little bit faster speeds, tiny bit lower latency, and a little bit better when it comes to rain fade. So it is a better unit. But like I said, once again, you do not have that fully articulating head where it will position itself by itself instead of you having to do it. So as we can see here, which is also important, it says outages. There is no outages currently of greater than 2 seconds for the last 15 minutes. If we click on that, we can go into a full outage profile. 5-second outages, nothing. 2-second outages. There was a network issue, it says, for 2 seconds, and that happened at 11:55 p.m. Nothing else under it. So it was 1 outage for 2 seconds. If we go to the 0.1 second outages, now here we're going to see a lot more because these are tiny little blips. And some of these blips are just simply handshakes. When we go from one satellite to another satellite as they're speeding by at 17,000 miles per hour, you know, there is sometimes this little handoff, this little handshake that happens, and you're going to have these cloud outages. So we can see a 0.7, a 0.8, a 0.6, a 0.8, a 0.8, a 0.9. These outages happen. Like I said, they're going to always happen. I would say, I shouldn't say always, they will get better as time goes on and there's more satellites up there, but we're going to have these less than 1 second little blips outages. That's just the way it is. All right, let's go back to the main screen. We are here. Now, if we come back down to advanced, there is something that a lot of people don't know about, and that is at the very bottom, it says debug data. Now let's go ahead and click on debug data. Now this is a JSON dump. We use it in administration, is a JSON. It's a full dump of what is going on. So this will give you all the information that you need to know as far as what is going on with your dish, with your router, with everything. So within debug, you get a lot of good information. We can see that there's green dots here. Green dots are good. Red dots are not good. Also, the data that we see, these little charts or these little graphs, these little percentages here, these are real time. All right, this is real time information. Ping drop rate, 0.0. That is the current ping drop rate for the Starlink dish. Now, if the satellite was moving away and we were getting into that area where there is a problem and we're going to lose 1 second as that handshake happens, well, we saw that it just popped up as 6.7. That will happen, but for the most part, it's going to stay at 0, and it should be. If you start seeing this number growing higher and higher and higher, you have a problem. Okay, so keep that in mind. So if we come down here, we have information, not stowed, normal signal, normal Ethernet speed, normal temperature, motor healthy. I have a motor, you might not, so you might not have that. Mast is near vertical, at service location, no updates available. That means, once again, we're up to date. Not heating, that means that it's not cold enough out there for the auto heating to turn on, so it is off. Not sleeping, that is another really cool feature that we can turn on, and we'll talk about that also in this video, sleep mode. And if we come on down, we have some more information about how long the uptime is of the router. How long has it been since it was rebooted? Mine is up for 5 days and 8 hours. We can see that there's a boot count so far of 291 times my router was booted. Now remember, my unit is extremely old. It's one of the very first version 2s or generation 2s to come out. We were one of 112,000 customers at the beginning. Now there's about 5 million. It's a big difference. Anyway, so we come down here, we see something called obstructions. That is very important for you. We can see sky obstruction, 0%. Time obstructed, 0%. Once again, valid duration, which is 5 days. That's how long it's been booted for. Valid patches, 4,222. Reference frame, Earth. It'd be great if it said Mars. I would like to see that. So if yours here says sky obstruction, and maybe it's 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%. Now we know that you're going to experience some outages, some slowdowns. The same thing with the time of obstruction. That is very important too, because during certain times you might be obstructed and other times you are not. That could be maybe a tree. Maybe you have some extreme wind and this tree is constantly blowing in front of your dish. Well, that's going to affect your obstruction. It's going to be obstructed and not obstructed, obstructed and not obstructed. Cut the damn tree. Anyways, next we have your alignment. Now this is not going to be important for me because mine, once again, is fully articulated, meaning it will do its own thing. All right, it says the bore site azimuth is 36.8, bore site of elevation would be 59.5, attitude uncertainty is 1.15%, azimuth is 35%, that's the target azimuth, and the elevation target is 59.7. We can see that my actual azimuth is 36.3, whereas the target is 35. So it's off by 1 degree. As you can see, it's slightly off, but it's not going to fix itself because it's good enough for what we're doing here. If I wanted to, what I could do is I could put my unit, since it's a generation 2, into stow mode. It will lock it so that you can travel with it or move it around. You're not going to break the motor. And then once you take it out of stow mode, it will reposition. It will spin around 360 and then reposition itself and lock on to what it needs to lock on. So for me, seeing that this is off by 1 degree, that would be probably not a bad idea. I'll throw it into stow and then unstow it and then let it reposition itself. For you, if you have a generation 3 and you see that it's out, that's all you have to do is go to your dish and now change it a little bit. Once again, you have a little kickstand, all right, so you don't have to change that angle, but to turn it left and right to get that angle just right, you can do that also. And there is a way to do it on the app itself. You don't need this information to do it, but when you look at this, you can see where things are. You can see the tilt of mine is 30.8. Yours might be different, especially if you have a version 3. Initialization. Now this right here is kind of interesting to me, and it might be interesting to you. The question I get sometimes is, how long does it take for my SpaceX Starlink to boot up when I can actually start surfing the web? How long is that going to take? Well, here you go. This is all of the information. So the initialization, it shows you stable connection, 1 second. It says RF ready, 36 seconds. GPS valid, 42 seconds. And then we go down here to where it says network schedule, and then finally first pop ping. Now, first pop ping is very important because your pop is your point of presence. That is the first ping that it sent out to your pop. My pop is in Miami, so we'll send a ping out and say, hey, are you there? And then Miami be like, yeah, I'm here. And it'll say, all right, we're good. And that took a total of 1 minute and 8 seconds. So for me, SpaceX Starlink is going to take 1 minute for it to become online and I can actually surf the web. Your miles may vary. Check it out. If you look in here in this debug data information, you're going to see how long it takes for yours. Now, if we come down a little bit further, we can see Starlink router, and then we have a ping drop rate and a ping latency. This is what the router is seeing. The router is seeing 0 ping drops, and we see that there is a latency currently of 41 milliseconds, and now this is going to change real time. 45 milliseconds. We want to see this, for me, in the 20s. Right now, it's a little bit higher than it normally is for whatever reason. If we come down below that, it has cable ping drop rate and then cable ping latency. This is the latency and drop rate that is from your router to the dish. This is important information. For a while there, SpaceX Starlink had problems with their cables, and their cables would melt and they would have problems due to the heating and other stuff. So they would have problems with their cable. This is great information because if you see that there's a cable ping drop rate of, let's say right now it's 0%, if it was 30%, 40%, 50%, when you contact SpaceX Starlink, they're gonna be like, yep, you have a cable problem. There's something wrong with the cable. The same thing with the latency. The latency between my router and the dish is 1 millisecond. If that thing said 20 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, 100, 1,000 milliseconds, you know that there's a problem with that cable. Now, could there be a problem with the modem as well as a problem with the router itself? Yes, it's possible, but most of the time this is going to take into account the cable and a cable issue. So this is good information. Then it has router, and we have the router has been configured. Bypass mode is not on. We're not bypassing. We are combining 2.4 and 5.0 gigahertz. This is a couple of things that you might want to change. Number one, you might want to go into bypass mode. We can look into that on how to do that, as well as instead of combining 2.4 gigahertz and 5.0, we can break them apart. There is reasons behind that also. If we come down here a little bit further, there is more information about the device and the signal strength. Now, where it says signal strength and RX rate, understand that that is between the router and your device. So that information is between my router and currently this iPhone. That's it, okay? That is the signal strength is negative 63 dB. And we see that the RX rate, or that rate of transmission between the phone and the router, is 700, let's call it, megabits per second. So if we had a gigabit, it wouldn't be able to do it, all right? Because we're getting a maximum of, let's say, 3/4 of a gigabit, or 700 up to 750 megabits. So that is good information. Underneath that, we have geolocation. I'm going to blur that out. That is the exact location where the router is. And then finally, we have more information about the phone. We have an iPhone and whatnot. It's not really important, but at the bottom, you have a couple other entries. You have use Starlink positioning exclusively, and you have allow access on local network. I would leave these alone. You don't need your router accessible to the local network unless you absolutely need to. And the same thing with the positioning exclusively using Starlink. What that means is if you turn that on, instead of it using GPS, it's going to use Starlink for positioning. That's going to give you less speed. It's going to give you more problems, okay? GPS is very, very important. And while SpaceX Starlink will eventually be most likely better than current GPS, until then, and there's more satellites up there, it's going to be a little bit off. So where GPS gets us down to maybe a meter or half a meter to get something really accurate on the ground as far as GPS, SpaceX Starlink is probably going to put you within, I don't know, 12, 15 feet, all right, 20 feet or something. So it's not going to be as tight, as accurate. So you don't want to turn this on unless you have some type of GPS issue going on. Most likely you don't, so leave that off. All right, so let's get out of debugging, get back here to the main page. And now we have networks. We're going to leave that alone. That's just going to show you all of your devices on your network. You don't really need to go into that. Obstructions is important because we want to see if there's any obstructions. And what will happen with this screen is there'll be red areas and blue areas. The blue areas are clean, meaning that there's no obstructions, and the red areas means that there's some type of obstruction. You don't want any red areas, okay? And if the red areas are on the outskirts, it's okay, It's all right. It says here, your Starlink has an unobstructed view of the sky. Starlink's obstruction map will become more accurate as it collects more data. Now, this has been collecting data, as we saw in the debugging information, for the last 5 days or so. So it's got a ton of data. So we can go and spin this around if we want, of course, on Mars, because we are on Mars, and see what it looks like. And as you can see, everything looks perfect. It is a perfect view of the sky. I never have any obstructions, and the reason being is I had to cut down a tree. That was it. I was one of those people that did have the tree that did this thing that I was telling you about before. It would be obstructed and then not obstructed, and obstructed and not. And then finally I said, the tree has to go. I'll plant another one somewhere in the yard, but this one has to go because I don't want to move the dish. It was in a good location. So anyways, let's get out of here, and we're going to go to speed test. Speed test is really important for a lot of us because we want to know what kind of speeds are we getting. Is it fast? Is it slow? What is going on? I've been noticing lately we've been having speeds that are a little bit slow, and I don't know if it has to do with congestion or what. I'm very close to a park, and during holidays when there is a lot of people at the park, we have a lot of RVers. So what does that mean? Now we have a ton of people in this specific cell, my cell, all right? And my cell becomes very congested, and we can see the speeds show that. 68 megabits down, and we're getting about 15.2 megabits up. That is probably the slowest that I've seen in quite some time. Let me go and run it again because that was kind of sad. It's kind of upsetting. I don't even like to see that, but it happens sometimes. Now we see something a little bit better. We're over 100 megabits. That is normally where we're at. We're anywhere from about 120 to about 220, 230. And once again, that has to do with the satellite that's overhead. If it's a version 1, it's going to be slower. If it's a 1.5, it's going to be a little bit faster. And if it's a 2.0 mini, I'm going to get the fastest speeds possible. So this time we got a latency of 32 milliseconds, 118 megabits down, and 13.1 megabits up. So take a look at that and see where you are. I would say check this maybe once a day for like a week or two and write down your findings. The idea here is to do those tests always at the same time. Because if people are moving in and out of your location, let's say they're going to work and then coming back, you're going to have different speeds due to congestion. So if you do the test every day at 1 o'clock p.m., do it every day 1 o'clock p.m. for a week and see what kind of speeds you get. Let's go back to the main screen. We have settings. Now, if we go into settings, there are the Starlink settings and router settings. Let's look at the router settings. We have content filtering. Now, people don't know what this is. This is very important to a lot of people that have families and little kids. If we click on content filtering, what it comes up with is add a layer of protection to your network and protect it from websites that are known to be malicious or contain adult content. Now, we have multiple options here. We have no filtering, we have malware, and we have malware and adult content. Now, I'll tell you how this works, but before I do, we can just simply click any one of these to get that filtering to turn on. I'll tell you how it works in just a minute. If we click on the malware, it will go and only protect us from malware sites. Sites that have, let's say, some type of phishing thing going on, where it's trying to steal your data or whatever the case might be. Also, if we add the one underneath it, besides malware, we're also going to get the adult content filtering, meaning that if you have a child on your network, they won't be able to go to sites that are known to have pornographic material, adult content in it. It will not allow them to get to those sites. Once again, it will be filtered out. Now, how does this work? If we go and hit learn more, this will tell us how it works. Now, I'll tell you instead of going through all of this how it works, but if you go here, you'll be able to read it for yourself. What is going on here is Elon Musk and SpaceX Starlink is using Cloudflare for families. Now, Cloudflare is a DNS company, but they do other things, and this is one of the things that they do. Now, 1.1.1.1 is a DNS server, right? You always hear me talking about pinging 1.1.1.1. Well, you can also ping 8.8.8.8. 1.1.1.1 is Cloudflare, whereas 8.8.8.8 is Google's name server. So we have seen that Elon Musk moved from Google to Cloudflare. And this happened a year and a half ago or so, maybe 2 years now. It's been a bit, but they moved from Google to Cloudflare. This is one of the things that is beneficial from that move. Cloudflare has what is called this for families. Now, for families, if we come down here, instead of using 1.1.1.1 for your DNS, it will also use, if we come down here, 2 other DNS servers. The first one for malware only would be using 1.1.1.2 with a secondary of 1.0.0.2. That is specifically for malware. So if we use that and we program that in, it will be doing malware protection. If we program in 1.1.1.3 and for a secondary 1.0.3, it's going to not only do malware, but it's also going to do the adult content filtering. So instead of having to put these in manually, you could if you wanted to, but instead of putting them in manually, that's all that we have to do is go back here and just simply click one of these. No filtering, malware only, or malware and adult content. So this is completely up to you. I personally have it for no filtering. I don't have kids on the network. And if I want to go to any site on the web, I can go there and I don't have to have Cloudflare say, no, you can't go there. So that's for me, but you do whatever works for you and your family. Now let's go back. So that is very important. That's the content filtering. If we come down a little bit further, we can see reboot router. If we slide that to the right, it will reboot the router. So if there is a problem, I would suggest that you reboot the router before you get into contacting SpaceX Starlink or anything. Reboot the router. That's the first thing to do. The next thing you could do is down here at the very bottom, go to factory reset. That will refresh the router from factory. You will actually have to put in the name of your router. For mine, it's called Mr. Bevel. So I'd have to put Mr. Bevel back in and then do any kind of setups that I have in the background set already, like for example, content filtering. I would have to redo those. So those are the first things. Number one, you want to reboot your router. If there's a problem, see if that fixes it. And then second, you want to do a factory refresh if that doesn't work. Now, if neither of those two things work, then I would say you can contact SpaceX Starlink. After you go and review all of that advanced data like I told you about, because then you could probably find the issue for yourself and tell them. They'll be able to do it themselves also. Anyways, underneath that, it has custom DNS. Now, this is what we were talking about before. If we click on custom DNS, right now it says enable custom DNS. It's not on. Let me turn this on. Now, this is what I do. Since I do not do content filtering of any kind, malware or adult, what I like doing is for a primary, I like to put in 1.1.1.1. That is Cloudflare. Then as a backup, instead of using Cloudflare, which would be 1.0.0.1, I'm going to put in here 8.8.8.8. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. We can see that there's the IPv6 numbers here. We don't need to worry about that. We hit save. And there we go. Now, what exactly did this just do? For instance, if Cloudflare went down and 1.1.1.1 was not working, what that would mean is I would have no internet connection at all, because DNS is required to be able to get onto the web at all, because it's doing the name lookups. So for example, if I go to JCristina.com, my website, the DNS server is going to be like, oh, JCristina.com is 128.17. It then looks up the address. All right, that's how it works. So if you don't have a name server that's functioning, you're not going to be able to surf the web. So by doing this, I have a primary as Cloudflare. So if Cloudflare goes down, it's going to use the secondary. And the secondary I have set up is 8.8.8.8, which is Google. That means that if Cloudflare is down and Google is up, I'm still going to be able to surf the web. I don't care that Cloudflare is down. That's what I do. The reason, once again, I can do this is because I'm not doing any type of malware protection and I'm not doing any type of adult protection either. So I am using this functionality. This works great for me. So let's go ahead and go back since we saved that. Now, the last thing on this list is bypass mode. Now, I'm not going to click on it and go through with it, but this is what it looks like. Remember, bypass mode bypasses the router completely. It actually says, bypass mode will completely disable your built-in Starlink Wi-Fi router. This is an advanced feature that requires a Starlink Ethernet adapter and a separate Starlink or third-party router. A manual factory reset will be required to reverse this. Keep that in mind. If you do bypass it completely, you will have to do a factory reset to be able to unbypass it, okay? I don't suggest you doing this. You really don't need to these days, but if you have a use case where you want to bypass it completely, what will happen is it will use that router as like an AP or as an access point or a bridge, let's call it. So it will bring in the data. It won't even touch it. It will not use it. It will just immediately ship it off to your third-party router. All right, whatever that is. Or you can use another Starlink if you wanted to, but there's no reason for that at all. But a third-party router. So if you have a $300-400 gaming router and you want to take the Starlink router out of the loop completely, you just simply go into bypass mode and you can do that. Now, there's one other thing that I want to show you here, and that is instead of going into router, we want to go into settings, then we want to go to Starlink. Now, these are the settings that are specific to Starlink. Now, number one, we have snow melt. If I click on that, you can see that mine is currently on automatic. Now, I'm in Florida. I can move this to off and I will be perfectly fine because I don't need the dish to heat itself up to melt snow, right? Because we are not in a climate where it ever snows. So I can turn this to off. I leave it on automatic because there has been people in the past that say, listen, if there is severe weather, sometimes what SpaceX Starlink will do is increase the, let's say the amps or the current to the dish to provide a little bit more power to cut through that weather. Now, does that actually happen? I've heard yes and no from multiple people. So I just leave it on because it's not going to hurt anything unless it gets stuck in the on mode. Now, that was a problem for a while where people would have it on in a hot climate because it would auto turn on or something was wrong and you would start burning out wires and whatnot. Because once again, it increases the amp load or the energy or the watts to the unit. It does not actually have a heater built into it, right? There's no coils that actually heat it. But what it will do is it will heat the circuitry so that it melts the snow off the face of it. So for me, I like to keep it on automatic, but you can turn it off once again if you're in a tropical climate somewhere. It doesn't make a difference. You also have preheating so that if it's frozen and you haven't been using it for a little while, well, you might want to preheat to melt the snow off it before you use it. And that's what that is for. Now, if we go back one, there's one more area, and that's called sleep scheduling. This is important to a lot of people, and the reason being is they're not using their Starlink all the time. So if you have, for example, a child that for some reason just loves to use the web during, let's say, the midnight hours, okay, if you wanted to, you could enable this sleep schedule to shut off the internet at midnight to 6 a.m., let's say, or from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., or however you want to do it. You can now have a schedule of an on time and an off time. This is really powerful. It is really powerful. Not everyone uses it, but it becomes something that a lot of people rely on, especially when you have kids and you don't want to have to shut their phone off and this and put a timer on that and a timer. You just basically are turning off all internet for that specific time. Now, is there better ways to do it? Absolutely. I personally would use a third-party router and then set up VLANs, virtual local area networks, and then have certain VLANs on at certain times and other VLANs off at certain times. That's what I would do, but that's for a whole nother video. Anyways, if we go back to the very beginning, we can see that everything looks copacetic. We have a ping success of 99.85, which is great. We have latency of 34 milliseconds, which isn't bad. Once again, I'm normally seeing about 20 milliseconds. So there are other things that we can do with this app, but didn't dig too far into it. But I'm sure there's a lot of good information in here that you probably didn't know about. And if there was even one thing that you found interesting here, throw the video a thumbs up. That is helpful. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not. I would really appreciate that. And if you want to give $1 or $2, you can. Once again, I put a little link down there below. Also, if you are new to SpaceX Starlink or old and you're purchasing a new one, use my promo code. That would be awesome. If you go to JCristina.com/Starlink, once again, JCristina.com/Starlink, you're going to get a month free. Also, I'm going to get a month free. And that's it. So it's a win-win. I don't get any money for it or anything, but we both get a month free. So once again, go to JCristina.com/Starlink. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the many years. And hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me and my family. Check out my merch, my shirts, my tees, my books, everything over there. Pick something up. I would really appreciate it. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and I'll see you in the next one. Love you all.